Hey everybody. Yeah, I am actually frozen. When I did this interview, my video did freeze up quite a bit, so I had to make some edits. But in this video, I'm talking to Daniel Bordman. He's a journalist with the National Telegraph, and he's been covering India for a very long time now. He always appears on the Indian news shows. So I thought, let me talk to him. So I decided to cut the interview up into 3 bits. The second bit, part 2, is about foreign interference. Part 3 is just how I guess Trudeau thinks he's Greta Thunberg. And this first part is about Khalistan. So let's get into it. His name is Daniel Bordman. He has been covering India and all of these topics and sort of has done deep dives into it, and we can probably get into it. But before we bring him in, let's just take a quick look at him in action on an Indian news channel. This is called Republic World.
You look at the Indian context and you just see the Canada, the Khalistan, you see Jagmeet Singh, Justin Trudeau on all the anti-India stuff, and you look at Nijar and was he, running a terrorist training camp to get people into Pakistan to kill you all? But in the Canadian context, go back a year, we have the accusations going off and this whole thing pops off. But really, the defining moment in Canadian culture is October 7th or October 8th, right? And that's when our streets became chaos. That's when mobs of extremists truly took over the streets. So, again, let's poor timeline management, but let's go back again before this. Last Diwali, there were, as the Canadian media called it, clashes, and this is a problem with having the fear of saying anything. Khalistanis attacked Hindus on Diwali in a Mississauga mall.
First of all, before we get into stuff, how did you? I know that you've been covering India as a topic for a long time. How did you first started getting interested in that?
Well, I mean, it all kind of ties together. So when you cover Canadian shenanigans, malfeasance, crime, or the deep problems that are in this country, you'll find that all roads are sort of tied together. Like Canada does have kind of how like Rogers and Bell own all our telecommunications companies and everything. If you're looking at the corporate world, like will ultimately tie back to Rogers or Bell or a few different things. Crime, we sort of have like this sort of all the bad actors kind of just come together, and it's sort of like a government, not a government, but like a oligarchical crown corporation type thing in terms of crime. So we find the Muslim Brotherhood, right, and all this cultural nonsense. You'll always find the Khalistanis. And because they're destabilizing the country, you will then find the CCP. And of course, the CCP has a vested interest in pushing any chaos in our streets, right? And then you get into that. And then, of course, the Russians have a part of that too. But then you also have people who are just like doing crime. Like, do criminals not have an interest in a country being soft on crime? So when Justin Trudeau just says, should crimes be less punishable? Well, who benefits? Criminals, right? So how do you have a multi-billion-dollar auto theft industry in our country? You need the ports to be controlled. And if you have the ports controlled, that means you have to have, corruption within the establishment, like unions, workers. You have to have, sort of corrupt institutions, which means different criminal and ideological organizations work together. You have to have people on your side of the port doing this and on the other side of the port doing this. So that's international criminal organizations, which are always tied to wide-scale terrorism, right? Because it's right. This is like the criminal black market, and you allow it to flourish. It does. So in Canada, when you find okay, what's the worst terrorist attack in our history? The Air India bombing, Khalistanis, where are they? And if you really get into any of the problems we're having down, you go down this, at some point, all roads do lead to the Khalistanis. Right? And then all roads you go down lead to the Khalistanis also will lead to the CCP, will lead to the Muslim Brotherhood, will lead to the Islamic Republic of Iran, right?
Yeah, there's two things that you kind of just said there. Like, we're soft on crime. It's the government that is soft on crime. That's kind of what we're learning. And then the connection of the CCP, the Khalistanis, the what have you. We've always heard of, lately we're very aware of CCP. We're very aware of some things, but a lot of us were not really aware of the Khalistanis. That's why you're seeing other podcasters do YouTube videos going, what is this all about? Would you agree that it wasn't really on our radar before, and all of a sudden this group popped up and we're like, what are you doing? What do you want? What's going on? Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I mean, they've been around for 4 decades in the country, pushing this. And I, again, as someone who is less enchanted with the claims of sunny ways and a new way forward that Justin Trudeau put out than most of my generation, I was always inquisitive on this. And we find that the Khalistanis are, and this is the thing with a lot of Western countries, and I think people in general, okay? I'm not slagging anyone for not speaking every language in the world, but let's be honest. Everything that is said not in English in Canada or America is completely irrelevant politically. So you could see this where you could find people threatening to kill Hindus, but if they just did it in Punjabi, then they could get away with it. And listen, I'm Jewish in Canada, so I grew up in a country which is like, yeah, it's not an anti-Semitic country. It's a great country. I love this country. Like 3 of my 4 grandparents were born here, but this is a country where sometimes lunatics will get up in Arabic my entire life and say, we need a caliphate, and the point is we need to kill Jews. And they would always add in Hindus too, right? The Hindu community was just like less up in arms about it, more ignoring it. So there's always this thing that you could ignore there. But, growing up Jewish, it's harder to ignore. So I was always interested in this type of thing. Like, who are these lunatics threatening to kill me, right? And if you go down that thing, like, who are the lunatics threatening to kill you? Then you go, oh, communists are here. Oh, outright neo-Nazis are here. Khalistanis are here. You're in Canada. Like, what's a Khalistani? Oh, they blew up the airplane. Why do they work together? And the reason why white people haven't found out are Canadians. It's like they don't really have a beef with Canada per se. They just use Canada as a base for their international campaign against India. But I've been screaming for years that they've actually, like, it's been, yes. So now this last year, you see them in the streets and they're pushing referendums, and Jagmeet's a Khalistani, and what is all this? And it's coming to the forefront. But like, this actually does affect you.
Well, I'm a Hindu Canadian. I am. And of course, I've worked, as you know, I've worked for Global News for 20 years before I got fired for questioning the COVID narrative. That's my backstory. But would you say that we covered Air India accurately? Like, why is it that I don't even recall that? Like, I don't know. Would you say our coverage was comprehensive in the news?
Cataclysmic failure on all accounts, society on the India file. In every way, the justice system, the media, the reporting, both types of racism. Both brown people don't matter because they're not white. Brian Mulroney literally called the Prime Minister of India and apologized to him and consoled him on his loss. And these were Canadian citizens. So that's the sort of like, you want to point to a system of systemic racism in Canada. How about that? But okay, why don't we talk about that as systemic racism when Justin Trudeau wants to be Canada? Because of the other type of racism that we use to on the Air India, which is the classic soft bigotry of low expectations. Of like, we knew this, but the Punjabi terrorist, right, or the Sikh separatist Khalistanis just screamed racism, this and that. So we didn't really get involved because we couldn't look at them and like actually translate this up. Be like, oh no, actually these are like dangerous, radical, extremist people with violent ideologies that will lead to clashes. It was just like, oh, this isn't like our thing. So
right, and therefore we don't report it that way. We don't take that angle. We take a soft angle when we're reporting. We don't actually call a spade a spade. Yeah,
and they threaten racism, and they learned, and then over the years, like again with their dealings with, again, they're ISI funded and back. So you throw in the Muslim Brotherhood again, because you see they learned, like the Muslim Brotherhood learned, to hijack the language of the political left to sell their narrative. And so this whole Sikh genocide thing and pushing that. But like, I'm going to tell you, where it comes to you as regular Canadians is like, okay, the trucking industry is a big is a big Khalistani dominated industry. And this is mass migration, taking unqualified people, tricking them into things. Either they come in as students or whatever programs, and then they're sort of like, oh, you're kind of screwed as Canada. Well, come work as a truck driver, right? And this is all the Punjabi, and Khalistani affiliated trucking companies can do things cheaper because they're using imported pseudo slaves. They don't drive trucks to the same standard that a Canadian citizen, like for some legal loophole reasons, like you can bring in foreigners to drive crazy pickup trucks without the proper qualifications and then send them leasing the road. So like, people are talking about like, oh, the crazy truck drivers in BC and the truck getting worse. It's like, yeah, because it's just people are human trafficked into the country under the promise of Canada by some immigration fraudsters, sold into like finding like the trucking industry, like being, one of these things where it's run out of. And companies are using, again, this is where like the corporate world comes in, because like, again, cheap labor, undercutting costs. So you can say, okay, I'm going to give it to this guy and my costs are going to go down like this. Now and the reason why, but the government should come in and say like, no, you actually have to pay. There's reasons why we have like a different driving license for again, a gigantic truck. Like, I'm a decent driver, but I
Mhm.
shouldn't just be able to get behind an 18-wheeler right now and take it onto the highway.
No. So, yeah, and we're
Yeah,
seeing that a lot more because of immigration rules have been,
lax.
companies are
And there's people,
incentivized.
and there's
Yeah.
when the rules get laxed, like, yes, there's
Yeah,
some good people here and there who try hard, and we're
of
all
course.
one race, human race, but there's actual hardened criminals that when you make a system that's easy to take advantage of, the few hardened criminals and people with nefarious intent, because they exist in the world and we cannot be naive, they're going to take advantage of all these different
Okay.
opportunities. And this
Okay.
is help create this ecosystem in which, this is just like one area where but then you find, again, like, when there's mass migration, again, mega corporate international corporations can benefit from cheap labor. So can potential criminal organizations and all this.
Mm.
And I'm
Mhm.
not like saying the Khalistanis are behind absolutely everything,
Mhm.
but in Canada, they're like tied into absolutely everything. But like on the vast majority of it, it's like you enable crime, crime's just going to happen.
Right.
And then when you enable crime, you get more organized crime because it's easier. And then when you get organized crime, you get more criminal and extremist organizations because they're
Yeah.
internet. Like, again, it's just who deals
That
with
Yeah,
the mob.
a very good perspective on the origins, like how this sort of came to be to where we are now, right? And you talk about this, and at the top of the show, I started to say we're seeing a lot of things on social media, right? And it was over the weekend that somebody had tweeted something, and I had reposted it because we don't see stuff like this here. I just want to show you a little bit of this, and then we'll get your thoughts on it. This video. Okay, let's.
So the RSS. Minister Justin Trudeau spewed venom against Bharat and also the RSS. Jagmeet Singh's statement said, "We are calling on the government of Canada yet again to put diplomatic sanctions against Bharat in place, ban the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh network in Canada." So, is he the one who's going to call the shots? I guess listening patiently to the entire backgrounder and explainer, we had to put it out there, ladies and gentlemen. We'll also put out a flowchart of who these leaders are, who in Canadian polity, all of them connected to Khalistanis, all of them connected to wanted entities in Bharat. That's the flowchart, and we'll go full frame in that. Abhijit Iyer Mitra, senior fellow.
Okay, you see that news coverage? We do not see that in Canada. I believe you were actually featured in that show also, that same
Yeah,
broadcast.
I know that guy. I might have been on that show or a different show.
Because you're on a lot of them,
I
but he's connecting Jagmeet,
yeah.
connecting Trudeau to all of this. I don't see this. Where I worked for years, I worked for CTV and Global. We don't see coverage like this. Can you give me some of your thoughts on these connections? First of all, would you define Khalistanis as terrorists? Yes or no? I mean,
So
are all of them? Can you paint them all with that brush? And can you talk about what the connections of Justin and Jagmeet to this group?
So listen, in Canada, who committed the worst terrorist attack in Canadian history? It was
The Air
Khalistani
India.
ideologues
Oh, yeah.
under the
Mhm.
Baba Khalsa. Now, no, just by someone saying India, does this automatically make them terrorists? Like, no, but there is a Khalistani terrorist ideology that is widespread, and there is an ideology that enables it. So, for example, the guy that we're going to war with India over, diplomatic war, Hardip Singh Najjar, he's the leader of the Khalistan Tiger Force, which India declares a terrorist organization. Canada hasn't said anything, but it is an offshoot of the Babar Khalsa, which we do declare a terrorist organization because it committed a terrorist attack. Now, Hardip Singh Najjar, take all that out, would publicly praise and promote Tawinder Parmar, the architect and the mastermind of the Air India bombing. So
Oh.
he's Tawinder Parmar is like Canada's Osama bin Laden. And a good amount of the
And yet we
Gurdwaras
don't
in
know
that
his
country,
name. Go on.
we don't
Yeah.
know his name. Again, this is another problem. We don't know his name. Okay, we don't know our history. We don't know this. So when I say Tawinder Parmar, it doesn't evoke the same of Osama bin
It
Laden.
means it's
But
meaningless. It's a meaningless
it's
name.
meaningless.
I worked in news 20 years and never heard the name.
Again, so this is another problem with Canada. It's like, but when a Gurdwara, a Khalistani organization, publicly praises Tawinder Parmar, has this video picture up as a shaheed, and parades behind pictures of him. And again, I've been sent materials from Brampton Gurdwaras, which teach kids in pamphlets talking about different terrorists. These guys are terrorists. It talks about their life being in Canada, going over to Pakistan, going into India, killing Indian police officers, coming back out, going back in, coming back out, and then like in his third mission to go kill Indian, he was killed and made a martyr for the cause by the Indian police because he was killed. This is terrorism. This is India's actual claim. Like, what's this whole fight about from the Indian end, which Canadian media completely ignores, is these guys are there. We actually do have terrorists on our soil. Like, their claim is that Canada's being used as a terrorist training camp and safe haven to launch attacks against India. And Hardeep Singh Nijjar's replacement as the new head of the Khalistan Tiger Force, who took over his organization, a guy on a student visa, Arsh Dalla, who's committed over 50 crimes in India, actually on video committing a murder or shooting someone with a gun and then getting like an actual like terrorist gangster style execution.
After pro-Khalistan designated terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar's death, Arsh Dalla had taken command. He was on the hit list of the National Investigation Agency, but we are told a few hours ago, Arsh Dalla was taken in custody and held in Canada right now. The Canadian authorities have arrested him right now. Now, Arsh Dalla was accused of being behind multiple targeted killings, smuggling weapons, cross-border terrorism. He has been involved in various organized criminal activities and is connected to the notorious Canadian gangster Goldie Berard. Two helpers of Arsh Dalla were accused of killing a man in a targeted killing. Punjab police apprehended two key operatives of the Canada-based Arshdeep Singh Dalla for their alleged involvement in the murder of a Sikh activist Gurpreet Singh Harinau.
The reason I know the name Arsh Dalla, I think that right, is because I saw it on one of those Indian broadcasts. No, I didn't see it here. And they talked about how he's wanted in India, yet Canada won't send him back. And
he was just involved in the largest shootout, like a massive shootout in Khalistani Central with another Khalistani gang. Again, like
where was the shootout?
I think I can't remember. Like South Ontario. One of the again, it's all mixed. Khalistani. There's a bunch of the Khalistani
on Canadian soil.
Canadian soil. So he's in custody by Canadians because he had a bullet wound in him. Like, this is how ridiculous it is. Like, we were like, and CBC does an expose, does an hour on this guy, and doesn't mention he's on video bragging about the bombing in the Indian Parliament that killed the Chief Minister of Punjab. What are we doing with this is an actual problem. Like, remember when Justin Trudeau brought a terrorist? Like, I actually tried to assassinate Usul Desange and tried to kill an Indian minister on Canadian soil, convicted, and then brought him on his trip to India. This is what the problem is. Like, India's mad because we were actually, imagine if in India, people were training at this, India had harbored the FLQ, these just radical French extremists. And over the last since Trudeau, for the last 4 decades, they've been fed absolute nonsense and critical race theory about Quebec. And they've been turned into Quebec Hamas because, Canada was always Quebec and has been stolen. And now they're sending them into America. And then they're sneaking across the US border into Canada and then running around Toronto and Montreal and Vancouver and Saskatoon, killing our police officers, then going back to the States, flying to India, and then bragging about it in their churches and in their temples, and putting up pictures of all these great FLQ terrorists who keep coming in and killing our police officers. This is what India is dealing with. That's India's problem with us. And we're saying, you killed a Canadian on Canadian soil. This guy snuck into Canada. He's not a Canadian. He snuck in. He was denied. He's an illegal immigrant. He tried to come in with fake paperwork. That was denied. He tried coming in with a fake marriage. That was figured out and denied. And then somehow he became a Canadian citizen, which means one of the Khalistani MPs in the Liberal Party wrote a letter and used his power to get him into the country as a citizen. That's the only way it could have happened with all this stuff going down.
Would this be a famous Liberal Party person?
I think it's the guy who's trying to reopen there's an MP who wants to reopen the investigation to Air India because we didn't F it up enough the first 2 times to run an investigation to see if it was actually the Indian government. Maybe it was the children on the plane who did it. They were playing build a bomb in the airport, and then they bombed their own airplane. You know how kids are. Maybe that's what's happened, and it wasn't the mastermind of the bomb who bragged about bombing the airplane. And then we have an investigation tying him and his entire organization to the airplane. Maybe this is what is going on, and because it doesn't involve any white people, no one really cares. And because when you do get down to it, you have to say, okay, actually there is because it involves like actual good and evil here. Like, there's one side that's the bad guys here, and because it involves that, and the bad guys will call you racist, no one gets in. And then the Khalistanis have people in all these organizations. Like, when the mainstream media talks to about Sikh issues, And it's tragic because like the Khalistanis aren't a majority of Sikhs. Like they're not the majority. But every time
we should make that clear.
Right? Every time the CBC talks to a Sikh, it's Khalistani, or
Yeah.
over 90%. And then other medias might be a bit better at like 60 to 70%, but it's completely inverted of the cultural dominance of Sikhs to Khalistanism is completely inverted in Canadian and Western media. Like we own, and is it so much their fault? Like, no, they learned how to infiltrate. They learned how to do the Muslim Brotherhood thing. They actually learned these tricks and applied them over the decades. They learned that you say, hi, I'm the leader of the Sikh community. If you're a Khalistani, I represent the entire world of Sikhs. I'm all the Sikhs. I represent the Sikhs. These are Sikh issues. If you don't agree with them, you're racist. And if you do agree with them, we're going to say you're the greatest person, and we're going to fund you, and we're going to mobilize, and you get your people into government. And you, like, again, like there are some areas of Canada where you have three options in your election. It's red Khalistan, blue Khalistan, orange Khalistan. And they've gotten into the parties, they've gotten into the organization because it's been 4 decades of this. And they're at the point where, you know, you have leaders of actual Gurdwaras bragging about terrorist bombings. And then there has been a bit of a Khalistani gang war in Canada where they've knocked each other off. If you want to look the behind the scenes for the listeners, like what India did is a couple years ago, they had a big blacklist of terrorists who weren't allowed to enter the country. And then a couple years ago, they took a bunch of people off the blacklist. And what Modi did is he took them off the blacklist. But in order to come off the blacklist, they had to make public statements saying, you know, United India is good. And they had to drop the Khalistani stuff. So they kind of gave a bit of an arm rant to half the people, half the not. This led to some people, like one of the guys involved in I think Rupert Singh Malik, who was involved in the Air India bombing, one of the architects. But he had kind of like, I guess, came around and like said, okay, India is fine and whatever. And he was killed in Canada. No one cares about his murder because that was
Rupert Singh Malik, right?
Yeah.
Him. Yeah. Okay.
He was killed by likely Khalistanis, and like some people were taken off the blacklist, didn't apologize to India, but Khalistanis are so conspiratorial that they said, oh, why was this guy taken off the blacklist? He's an Indian agent. And they all started accusing each other of being Indian agents because they're Khalistanis and they're not very smart and whatever. So they started kind of killing each other. Now, did India do this as an offer of peace, or did India do this as a clever method of like, okay, you know, this isn't quite the pager level operation, but if we can do this and so did India take someone off the blacklist was this an olive branch or a clever ploy to get them to start killing each other because they couldn't start killing each other, right?
Right.
Column A, column B, we don't, right?
We don't know. Yeah.
This like that is some of the background of going like the couple years before is like, again, so different. And the people, and Hardeep Singh Nijjar's faction was not sad when Malik died. They were didn't go to his funeral with flowers, we'll put it that way. So
we should probably give people a little bit of a BG on who Hardeep Singh Nijjar is. He was the head of the Guru Nanak Sikh temple in Surrey, and I think he was obviously a Khalistani, right? Yes. And he was murdered in the parking lot, shot I think 50 times last year in the parking lot. And I think that the only reason I know this is because I've been watching clips of those Indian shows that you've appeared on. And that he gave some financial donations to Jagmeet Singh. Not huge donations, but you know, I don't know, enough to maybe, I don't know, somebody signing for him. Whatever.
I mean, that's not the big, like, that's not $1,500. Okay, he gave $1,500 to Jagmeet. That makes sense. He's a Khalistani. Jagmeet's a Khalistani. That was for Khalistanism. They didn't tell us anything we didn't know. That's not like, again, there are bigger. We have bigger fish to fry with Hardeep Singh Nijjar than that. It's more the praising of Pamar, the being the head of the Khalistan Tiger Force. You know, the praising of different suicide bombings and assassinations and all that different stuff. But like, you know, Hardeep Singh Nijjar, he was one of the leaders in this. So you go in the beginning, like, okay, what's the utility of killing Hardeep Singh Nijjar? Like, was he about to lead this massive revolution on Khalistan, and you had to stop him? Like, maybe. Then, like, what's the risk of being caught? And then it's also like, how does India operate? Like, as someone who you've pointed out, thank you for telling your audience that I appear on Indian TV a lot. I can tell you as someone who's had some dealings with Indian bureaucracies, okay? And I say this there, like, I'm convinced if you had the Indian consular general and all the Indian bureaucratic staff and the Indian government order, plan, and try and execute an assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar with all full maximum serious effort, there's a 99% chance he'd be alive today. Okay, that's just it. If you had the entire weight of the Indian bureaucracy trying to kill him, he'd be alive. That's just hello, sir. Hi, sir. Like, there's some
Why? They're completely inept.
It's 1,000 different chimpanzees and 1,000 different typewriters. It would have leaked. It would have like gotten in. Someone would have stopped it. There would have been 3 people going off trying to do the same thing at the same time, and things would collapse. Now, did someone in the Indian bureaucracy put their fingers on the Khalistani gang war that they might have instigated here and there and played some sort of politics in it? Yeah, maybe. You can. I can believe that there's a middle ground narrative between what India and Canada are claiming. That seems like the most likely to me. So you saw this, and it's like also like, but then again, like, are we going to go and put our honor on the line as Canadians? Like, a Canadian is a Canadian. Is Hardeep Singh Nijjar where we're going to make the stand? The guy who shouldn't have been a Canadian, who's stuck into our country, who's using our country to just suck benefits and call for actual ethnic violence on our soil and an Indian soil. So yes, he wasn't calling for white, but you're Hindu. He was very violently anti-Hindu. We can't, like, again. So we can't. Our inability to have these conversations is mixed. So, like, why does India like me? Well, because I'm one of the, like, let's be honest, I'm one of like the handful of white people who even knows what the hell's going on.